This is a short video demonstrating the finer points of navigating to a location with memory maps, or I'm using Hema four-wheel drive maps, which is exactly the same. So basically, I'm standing on Quarry Oval. I've marked a point over Dural Station that we can see there. And if we click on the flag, we can bring up some details, and that says Dural Station. It also tells us that we're about 0.12 kilometres or 120 metres from the station based on my current position. We're seeing flashing in the right circle in the middle of the screen. And it's a true bearing from this location of 337 degrees or 338 degrees, and just moves around a little bit because the GPS has me moving around. We can see my GPS accuracy is good at this location. It's about 5 metres. If we want, we can navigate to that point. Now we do that by clicking on the red down arrow next to the flag. Now we've clicked on it to bring up the menu of options, and in there we can see there's a go to. So if we press the go to, it's going to bring up a go to function, and there's a few elements. Now I should just mention the black dot almost directly but not quite to the north is the clubhouse that's there, and I'm facing with my phone pointing directly at the clubhouse. Now I'm going to sort of point you at a couple of elements. Firstly, on that circle, there's a little arrow pointing out to it, and it's pointing at the clubhouse. So the way I've got my settings set on this app, which I will show you at the end of the video, how to set it like this. There's a setting that allows us to use the compass when we're not moving, and so that arrow, basically that arrow points in the direction we're heading. And I've set a setting to say use my compass if I'm stable, because that's the best way of doing it. But normally when you're moving, it uses the change of your GPS position to determine speed and direction. Now, if you're moving consistently and at, something of a reasonable speed, even walking's probably good enough, it's reasonably accurate. Might jump out a little bit as 5 metres of accuracy on the GPS comes into play. But that arrow should point in the direction you're walking. And as you walk, I've got this set so that the arrow jumps out and draws a long line on the speed, in the direction that you're walking, but also it takes a guess at where you'll be in 5 minutes. This is the way I've got it set, based on your walking speed and direction. So that's arrows. We'll see that in a minute. And occasionally you can see it jump out, but that's just the GPS getting a little bit confused as it jumps around the place. So it tends to be a little bit all over the place when you're stable, but don't worry, when you're still. But don't worry about that. In the top left-hand corner, I've got another arrow, which is having a crack at pointing in the direction of where you're trying to go to. So if I look at that arrow on my phone, it is actually pretty much pointing at the station. Now again, when I'm still, that will be based on compass on an iPhone, which I wouldn't necessarily count on that, but it just gives you an idea. Now if I start walking to the clubhouse, it will you won't know about it, but it should be changing to detect the fact that I'm moving, and it'll be using the GPS. So we can see there, I'm walking to the clubhouse, and the red arrows pointed, we can see jumped out. That's guessing where I'm going to be in 5 minutes. So if I could walk straight ahead, that'd be across the road in Hema's Road, and that's what it's showing me. Now we can see the arrows over the clubhouse as we expect. We're not really going to the brigade. So if I was navigating to the brigade, I'd hopefully be able to tell that, and the green arrow is pointing in the direction of the brigade. So I should, even if I was blind, I would, I'd turn around until I can get those arrows pointing at the direction of the brigade. So now at the moment, I've done that by looking at the GPS, and you know, I'm sort of in that direction. Now, if I look up, I can see I'm walking directly at the brigade. If you get a bit distracted and wander off course, now I'm going to sort of walk away from the clubhouse. And we can see that arrow swung around, the long arrow, and hopefully you pick up that you're walking the wrong way. And then the arrow in the top left hand of the screen, it's pointing effectively which way it wants me to turn. So if I turn around and start walking towards the brigade, which I can see all these arrows are lining up in the direction that I can see. So that's navigating to a point. So I'm just going to cancel that navigation. So a few points. I highly recommend you don't walk around anywhere with your head buried in the GPS. You're probably much better off to just use that as a bit of a hint if you're totally confused. But mostly you'll be better off using your situational awareness of kind of go, oh, the point's over there on the map, and looking at the map for the best way to get there. It's not always in a straight line. Often you might be better off walking back to a track to walk around a road and circle round and come at a point from a better direction. So that's the navigation. I probably should show you a few settings that affect how this works. So in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen on memory maps, you'll have an arrow pointing to the second, to enable you to go to the second screen, which I've just pressed there. In Android, this can look slightly different, but the functionality is very much the same. So you've just got to find the corresponding buttons on Android to make this right. In the bottom center of the screen, there's a cog. So that's settings. So if we push on that, it brings up a menu, and GPS settings is what we want here. And I'm going to talk through a few options. This is probably not the exact default, but it's pretty close to it. Starting at the top of the screen, we've got a velocity vector, which I've got turned on. So that's the one that makes the red arrow, pop out of the screen and shows the direction you're moving. The next one down is the velocity time scale. So I think this is the default, but it's showing the end of the arrow will show where I'll get in 5 minutes. So you can move this around to suit your application. The range rings I don't really use, but I think it puts some rings around your current point that is based on that velocity vector. So it shows how far you might get from any point if you turn in that direction. I don't really use it. The next one down is the averaging time in seconds. So because the GPS jumps around a little bit, if you take too finer readings, things can jump around a lot. So what this does is, if we have it turned on below, it will average what it's reading off the GPS over, in this case, 30 seconds. Which will smooth out some of the GPS jumping around and, make it a bit more consistent and smooth. The downside is that if you change direction or speed, it might take a little bit longer before that averages out and tells you a better reading. Below that, we've got the compass heading when stationary. As I think I said before, memory maps would probably prefer to use your changes in your GPS position to determine direction and speed. But if we turn that on, it will use your phone compass to give you an idea so that it can start pointing the arrows even when you're still. Just note that that'll be all subject to the limitations of the iPhone compass. Which, I would say is not spectacular and not a substitute for a proper compass. But, it can be useful, as we saw there. And that button below, I think that just, if you turn that on, it turns on the velocity averaging setting that we use above. And I think that's probably used for both speed and direction. Anyway, that's the idea, but navigation is not meant to be watched on YouTube to learn, so I highly suggest get your memory maps, getting a reasonable topological map that will work in small distances of walking around. Go outside, drop a pin at the end of your street or somewhere, known point, and try navigating to it, and it'll become pretty obvious as you do it. Thank you.